For our next induction, we'd like to call to the stage Doug Montgomery, Gil Brockenier, as we induct Frank Mazza. Fast Frank Mazza was a gold medal Olympian and gold, silver, and bronze Paralympic World Games medalist. He started racing in 1982 and represented Canada internationally from 1983 through 1986. Frank was born in Peterborough on April 7, 1958 to his loving parents, Frank and Maria. He was born with cerebral palsy, which affected his body movement, muscle control, muscle coordination, muscle tone reflex, posture, and balance. It also had an impact on his fine motor skills, gross motor skills, and oral motor functioning. Cerebral palsy's effects on functional abilities varies greatly. Many affected people can walk, but others, like Frank, need to use wheelchairs. In the early 1980s, Frank started wheelchair racing. Frank's CP affected both his legs and his right arm. So he used his left arm only to propel his wheelchair, while his competitors used both arms. He competed in the Eastern Ontario CP Games, as well as the Ontario CP Games, and won many of the events he participated in. These successes led to greater athletic opportunities. A 2-year training program was designed by Team Canada for him, and he was able to acquire a racing wheelchair. Frank's goal was to compete at the 1984 Olympics for the physically disabled, which were called the International Games for the Disabled, and were the equivalent of today's Paralympics. He surpassed this goal. At the 1984 Ontario Provincial Games, Frank won the 60-meter sprint, the 100-meter sprint, and the 400-meter sprint. That same year, he won gold medal. He was the gold medal winner for Canada in the 4x100-meter relay at the International Games for the Disabled. In 1986, Frank took part in the International Cerebral Palsy Games in Belgium, where he won gold in the 4x100-meter relay, silver in the 400-meter sprint, and bronze in the 100-meter sprint. Unfortunately, Frank's racing career was cut short by a cancer diagnosis in 1986. Although he beat the disease, he was unable to compete again. Frank Mazza was inducted into the Ontario Cerebral Palsy Sports Hall of Fame in 1990, and tonight we're here to celebrate his incredible career. Please congratulate Frank Mazza.
This is Anna, Frank's sister, and she'll say a few things after. My name is Doug, and I have the privilege of being Frank's chauffeur, coach, and wingman for all his racing career. That's Frank. Frank had a stroke a while ago. He's a man of few words. So we've talked about this speech, and words coming to my lips are his sentiments, and 100% approved by Frank. First, he wants to thank the Hall, the committee, members on the committee for this wonderful honor. It made Frank really happy. Frank's racing career ended in '86, and he's moved a few times since then. And many people in his life didn't appreciate the significance of what Frank did when he medaled at Olympics and World Games, winning gold and silver and bronze. But now people know about it because of the honor bestowed by the Hall. Frank really, really appreciates that and wants to say thank you. Good. Thank you. He trained really hard. He trained 3 days a week at Gold.
Doug, put the mic up to your nose.
Sorry. Sorry. Frank trained 3 days a week at Gold's Gym here in Cobourg, lifting weights and doing core stuff, and 3 days a week at the track, 1 night a week at the track. Wednesday night was for endurance and memory muscle control of his hand, and he was doing 12K that night. He really trained hard for a number of years. With some volunteers, Ted, Jane, and some other people that helped with driving Frank to training and putting him through his paces. And he wants to thank those people too. We're all familiar with the able-bodied Olympics and Special Olympics for athletes with intellectual disabilities. But back in the 80s, most of us didn't really know about the Paralympics or the Games for the physically disabled. And we were in like Belgium at the Olympics in New York. There was no TV cameras, very few press followed them, so it wasn't something a lot of people knew about it. People in the Paralympics then were the visually impaired, amputee, wheelchair, and CP. Frank raced in Class 3 CP. Class 4 was the highest class, and both guys had no problems with their upper arms. Frank only could race with one arm. Everyone he raced against in Class 3 used both arms, but one of their arms had minor effect. So he was at a disadvantage. More important was all his competitors had the latest technology in racing wheelchairs. During the 80s, bicycle racers and wheelchair racers were coming up with all kinds of new technology. He was racing in a regular wheelchair, which we had made changes because no wheelchair company. We contacted university engineering departments or schools, even some machine shops to try to get someone to make him a one-arm chair. It was a unit of one, nobody would do it for us. Finally, at the Ontario Games, in, I can't remember the year, I think it was around 82 or 83, we met a gentleman, Coach Wilton introduced me to him. Coach Wilton, I'll mention this shortly, he was the head coach of the Canadian team. This man was a promising athlete, was in an accident, became a wheelchair racer, he was an engineering student, he would build his own chair. He reluctantly took on the task of making a chair for Frank because he could understand his frustration. But there was no template ready to follow. And over a period of 3-4 months going back and forth, he made the first one-arm racing wheelchair in North America. We were in Belgium at the World Games. There was a lady there from Netherlands. We put over, she had a one-arm chair, and Frank was checking her out, weren't you, Frank? Was she checking her out? Checking her chair. She had had her chair made about 6 months before Frank. So Frank's one-arm racing chair, which is on display over at the community center, was the first one in North America and the second one on the planet. And after he got this chair, his times really just crazy. Coach Weldon and myself and a few other people said to me, Frank was probably, I'm sure it was, the fastest one-arm wheeler on the planet back in the days. Anyway, over here is Suzanne Atkinson. Stand up, Suzanne. Suzanne Atkinson was working at the Cobourg Star, became one of Frank's fans, and she wrote an interest story about Frank. And got interested in his racing career, attended one of the meets that we were at in, I think it was at Windsor at the Canadian training camp. And she started following Frank's story. Her writing became some of the history, basically, of Frank's racing career. As well, Cobourg community learned about Frank from Suzanne's articles. And when we needed money to pay for a chair, pay for international travel. So Suzanne wrote about it, and the Cobourg community was incredible. We don't have a list because it was back in the 80s, but I know it was all the Cobourg service clubs. There was a church, a Girl Guide group, some other interest groups, several businesses and individuals donated towards Frank's chair, paid for Frank's chair and his travel. You want to say thank you, Frank?
Yeah, to you.
At the 84 International Games, they were in New York, Rick Hansen, Mr. Man in Motion, he saw us at the track and wheeled over. He was with a different part, he was on the team, but he was in a different part. Frank was racing the CP, and he was looking for somebody on the Canadian team to watch his kit bag while he raced and asked us if we were going to be there. So Frank hung on to his kit bag. I remember him commenting about it was the first one-arm racing chair he had ever seen, and he checked out watching Frank race. And this was not unusual. We were at international meets. After Frank would race, athletes, coaches from other countries would come over and want to check out his chair and congratulate him because they just couldn't believe somebody with one arm could push a chair so hard, stay in his lane, and be one of the fastest in the world. In fact, at the international meets, Frank didn't always win the gold medals, but everybody he raced at in Class 3, he beat them all, one race or another, except for one person. So he was incredible. want to mention one other thing here, the relay, the 4x100 meter relay. Frank was the 4th fastest racer on Team Canada's team. So he was on the Canadian relay team. Wheelchair racers don't pass a baton to each other because they're wheeling, so they have an exchange box. So when the first racer goes and hits the front door of the race box, each box is 30 meters long, the second racer connects at the back. If they leave too early, the team gets disqualified. But more of a challenge, these guys are flying. They have to stop in their lane within that 30-meter box, and if they grabbing on to hang on to stop flying, and if they go outside the lane, because there's other teams on the side there, there's officials there, and the team will get disqualified. Now this is not possible to do for a person with just one arm holding 2 rails on one side. He would go out and the team would have been disqualified. This meant Frank had to be the anchor for the team, which meant Frank, a class 3, every team had class 4s on their anchor, their fastest guys. So he was up against every other country's fastest racer, class 4. And this was just, you know, a monumental task. Maybe Doug Wilton can stand up here. Doug Wilton. Doug Wilton was the manager and head coach for Team Canada for well over a decade. He saw Frank at Ontario Games and Cobourg introduced himself and suggested if Frank took training serious and did a chair, that, you know, he might make it on Team Canada because he was looking for some class 3 racers. And his coaches and Doug were a great help to Frank over the years, and Frank did make that. Next thing I want to do is read a quote from Doug when, I forgot to mention, Suzanne was the person that initiated putting Frank's name forward into the hall. And so I contacted Doug Rockburn with some information, told him what we were doing, and unsolicited, he sent a letter in support of Frank's nomination. I'm not going to read the whole letter, but I want to read one paragraph here. Quote from Coach Rockburn. As a coach, this was perhaps the most exciting moment of my career. In the 1986 World CP Championship Games, we were in a battle for the overall championship with the U.S. and Great Britain, both who had larger teams than us. They kept changing the criteria for standing. One day it was most gold medals, the next day total medals, then points. Our morale was not high. We had a very good last day, and the last event was the 4x100 meter wheelchair relay. As coaches, we were very nervous about having Frank in the relay. He was the only CP3 racer on any of the top teams. Plus, he wheeled so hard that sometimes he was out of the lane, which would disqualify our team. We went with Frank, and he wheeled the most incredible leg of a relay imaginable. We won gold and set a new world record in a photo finish. Our team went crazy with joy and excitement. Everyone was at the finish line. We didn't know it at the time, but that gold medal gave us the most gold medals, the most total medals, the most points, so it was undeniable that Canada was the overall world championship nation. Frank had won individual silver and bronze medals at this meeting, but his contribution to the relay win was monumental. So few of our CP athletes have been recognized for their contributions, and they were incredibly significant. The development of the Paralympic program and the entire opportunity for people with disabilities to be integrated and included in all walks of life was spurred by people like Frank Mazza, who changed the focus from disability to ability, what you can do, not what you can. As I said, they go from the wall. To me, fast Frank Mazza is a true Canadian sports hero. End of quote. I want to thank you, Frank, man. The opportunity to be trackside, to watch this man race every race, it was unbelievable. And he was such an extreme competitor. Like Doug, I say, Frank, you truly are a Canadian sports hero. Thank you for letting me be part of it. We have a blast. We travel all over and we just have a blast. Two people Frank wants to thank. First, his family. This is Sister Anna in the crowd tonight, his brother Dino, and his sister Pia and Reese. And Frank wants to thank your family.
You
Stand.
Yeah.
Just wait. Say thank you.
Yes, Frank.
Anyone wants to say something?
Thank you, everybody. Frank is so happy to be here tonight. He's been talking about this banquet for months. Hey, Frank?
Yeah.
We have to thank so many people, but we'll start with Doug Wilton. It was you who saw great potential and vision in Frank. Doug and all the assistants that helped you with the training, practices, the sacrifices you made to bring Frank to Paralympic level. Suzanne Ambrose Atkinson, thank you for your journalism, your constant journey with Frank, and relaying it to all the people of Cobourg. And you are definitely his biggest fan. And thank you to Community Live in Trent Highlands, all the dedicated support workers and administrative personnel who have been with Frank for years and continue to support him. But mostly I have to thank the people of Cobourg for your generous time, for all the fundraising you did to support Frank, to let him be able to attend the races and pay for all the everything that had to be paid for, hotel, accommodations, flights, food, everything. And to Ross Quigley and the Sports Hall of Fame committee for a magnificent, memorable evening for all of us. On behalf of my parents, my sister Pia, my brother Dino, and especially Frank, thank you very much.